everyone, welcome to LEGO Rewind, where we take another look at old retired LEGO themes. Today's gonna get weird, even as far as LEGO Space sub-themes go. Most of LEGO Space focuses on human minifigs, and sometimes robots, but to this day, Space has had a pretty lacking alien presence. Even the Martians are really just our friendly neighbors. UFO, cliche as it may appear, gave us our first feel for a fleshed out, truly alien culture operating independently of the usual space factions. The minifigs themselves had an ominous and Borg-like quality. Their Predator-esque helmets were sinister enough, but underneath? Now these are aliens. This amount of printing detail is pretty standard these days, but at the time it was unprecedented. Some of these are just robots, but the ones with helmets? It's hard to tell where their cyborg enhancements end and their organic parts begin. Assuming these backgrounds are their home planet Zotacs, I guess I shouldn't be surprised they've modified their bodies to this extreme. The Zotaxians were a pretty diverse race and could just as easily be the heroes or the villains of any given story. Their fleet contains surprisingly few vehicles that look how we'd expect a stereotypical UFO to appear, and even the ones that do are loaded with radio telescopes, solar panels, and other details to spice them up. There's no reason that car needs to be designed that way, it just is. It's unique. The aesthetic of UFO is appropriately out there. Space started out pretty tame. Gray, blue, yellow, then some black and green and white. Every sub-theme needs its own unique palette, and they usually stick to 3 important colors. But UFO, while mostly gray, neon, and red, had so many other colors sprinkled throughout its designs that I can understand people thinking it's an eyesore. But I say it fits the harshness of the Zotaxians. The biggest point against these sets, you could say, are those huge curved pieces, and I'm pretty sure they've been retired. We have similar elements now, but smaller and easier to build around. These are even more infamous than the big ugly rock piece, to the point that the first Millennium Falcon LEGO ever released is considered an embarrassment by many, but I still have a soft spot for it. Interesting to see this kind of thing attempted 5 full years before 2002 sets pulled out the same thing, more streamlined and subtle. Really though, those are just the tops of these ships. The interior builds themselves are okay, and I appreciate how many different kinds of ships they were able to make with just those cumbersome elements. UFO was mostly a 1997 release, transitioning to Insectoids the next year. The marketing for this particular theme is some of the most brazenly deceptive LEGO's ever put out. The ads frame these like they're actual football-sized bugs creeping up and grabbing people. But don't be fooled. The Insectoids we see are not actually bugs at all. They're not even alive. This line sees a rogue faction of the Zotaxians flee their homeworld on account of losing a war against their own oppressive leadership and Zotax being a hellish wasteland anyway, only to find themselves on a world that's even worse. The new planet was overrun by giant insects that refugees wouldn't stand a chance against in a direct confrontation. So to protect themselves, they disguised their vehicles with fake eyes, legs, wings, antennae, and stingers as a deterrent, making them look like giant bugs to confuse the real ones. This is brilliantly subversive and actually pretty grounded. I can totally see us doing this kind of thing on a hostile world, and it makes the line kinda quirky. Sure, intelligent beings like us will notice the obvious wheels and thrusters, but a giant primitive bug monster who never seen these before probably would be fooled and think, "Whoa, I don't want to pick a fight with that guy, look at his mandibles." That's such a clever use of those pieces that would still look good if they did it today. These don't need to be terribly realistic as bugs or vehicles, and that flexibility gives the theme great mocking potential. The colors are more subdued, especially on the minifigs. When you see through all the space gear and cyber implants, they look a little more human than before, but not too much. It's just enough to make them more relatable, make it easier for us to understand their plight. They're still very alien with their gray or blue skin and all the implants, and I like them for it, especially their queen, Gypsy Moth. Making a bad habit of flying towards the sun or other bright lights, she's one of the more unique individuals LEGO's created for classic space, and it's all too fitting to have a queen in a line like this. Fun fact, not only was a shoulder armor from these tweaked and reused in Alpha Team, but so is his helmet. These minifigs don't look as likely to be bad guys as the older Zotaxians, whose faces were harder to read but still somehow came off as kind of aggressive. Even the new backgrounds don't look as harsh. The whole thing has a quieter, more mysterious atmosphere than UFO, and oddly enough, I think that may be why it's remembered more. It just had a clearer vision. The line also had a lot of neat tricks, so did UFO, but not as many. We got lights and sounds, magnetic stickers. It was that weird time when LEGO was experimenting a lot. It's understandable if people think UFO was a low point for LEGO Space where that experimental side started going out of control. But Insectoids, even with all its gimmicks, tied this down with a more grounded yet still incredibly distinctive look. But 1999 was the end of LEGO Space as people knew it. It was the last sub-theme to focus on a single faction in that wider galactic community. Then came Rock Raiders, which mostly centered on the human raiders themselves, the real aliens in this case, but give us a glimpse of that planet's natives like the rock monster. Then we see Life on Mars, which featured Earthlings interacting with peaceful Martians. And you know how much I love that one for how unique it was and still is. after over 20 years of consistent releases, of there always being some iteration of LEGO Space on shelves. It was several years before Mars Mission came along, and you know how I feel about that theme too. This one did feature aliens from who knows where, but only as antagonists, which in a vacuum isn't bad, but it was indicative of the direction we'd see all of LEGO Space going in the future. Then came Space Police 3, where the police are all humans and the criminals are all aliens, which paints a pretty gross future where these other races may just be minorities displaced and oppressed by an ever-expanding human empire. Ugh. But that's a topic for the eventual Space Police video. For all its innovation, LEGO does repeat themselves a lot, and why shouldn't they? It's perfectly reasonable that each generation should have their own take on insert classic theme here, since they missed it the previous time. In this case, the next generation would have their own version of UFO and Insectoids in the form of Alien Conquest and Galaxy Squad, and these themes are okay. Alien Conquest at least has a little more personality than Mars Mission. The blue and yellow of the Earth vehicles looking nice and the invading aliens being corny as heck. I don't much care for the other aliens, but I love their commander's design. Look at how distinguished he is. Though the builds are still a little repetitive, they're more intricate than UFO's giant plates. It's basically Mars Mission with a brighter coat of paint, which does make a big difference. But I just don't care much for these alliance where it's humans against everyone else in some war. That's what made UFO unique, was the focus being entirely on the other side's culture and them not necessarily being bad guys. Then there's Galaxy Squad, which is kinda like Insectoids if the vehicles were normal and you could actually see the giant bugs they were redesigned to emulate, so that's pretty cool. I do like how much spacier the humans' builds are. They don't look too earthen, and I like how they switch up the secondary color for different teams within the Galaxy Squad. Red, blue, green, orange. If it was just white and one other color across the board, just that would make these designs feel more repetitive than they are. And the bugs themselves, while resembling Earth ones, are still pretty alien and decently lifelike. And they aren't a perfectly even mix of green and red, sometimes they lean more towards one or the other, so that helps mix things up too. This line began and ended in 2013. We haven't seen any other space themes since, unless you want to count Star Wars, but that's gonna be there forever. I mean something original that LEGO made from the ground up. Between this and the failure of Castle, among other things, it feels like the only evergreen system themes these days are Ninjago, Friends, Elves, City, and then a whole bunch of licensed themes. But I don't expect this dry spell to last. We'll see LEGO Space in some form again someday, and maybe it'll be amazing. Maybe it'll blow us away like never before. But personally, I hope they don't fall back on the same cliche conflict between humans and evil aliens again. I understand if people who grew up with those later combat-driven themes like it that way and don't see any issue with it, but I just find it limiting, inward-looking, not very imaginative. I want to see how grand and overwhelming and mysterious space can be, just going out there for the sake of it again, the joy of exploring other realms and meeting other races. You can say it isn't LEGO's job to inspire us that way, but they had no trouble doing it before, so I don't know what's changed aside from maybe us. Anyhow, I've rambled enough for today. If you want to support my work, please consider checking out my graphic novel series, Planet Ripple, and sharing this video. Now pack your things, we're going to the Arctic.
On every street, they're building, calling, crawling. In every neighborhood, they're glowing, flying, multiplying. LEGO Insectoids are coming for you.
Cool.